So if you folks have been following the channel for a while, you've heard me speak of my old mentor when I was just a kid, Pony Bill Wagman. So named because he made kind of a small fortune swapping ponies when ponies were the big thing. Everybody thought they had to have one for their kid until they realized that ponies were just miniature horses with bad minds. Sorry, pony folks, but all too often that's true. But while they were hot, he would absolutely put them into the system, and that's how he got the name. He remained a horse trader the rest of his career. And I learned from him, and I learned some thoughts about trading horses and buying and selling horses. Although frankly, I never was able to bond with the idea of being a horse dealer or a trader or somebody who bought and sold a lot of horses. I have owned a lot of horses. I've sold a fair number of horses, a lot of them with regret, because I really get attached to them. That's fine. If you're going to be a horse trader, you got to harden your heart a little bit. So he gave me a couple of thoughts that kind of stayed with me over the long haul. One was, you had to be very realistic if you were swapping horses on the relative value of the horses or the thing you were swapping for. And there was a fella who had a chance to sell a horse to Bill for cash, but he chose not to because he said, I traded him on a motorcycle. And he said that motorcycle was worth $1,500 and you were only going to give me $1,000. And I said to Bill, you know, he did do pretty well for him. You know, he swapped that horse off on a motorcycle and it was worth $1,500. And Bill said, let me tell you a story. There was an old lady, rich old lady, and she's driving along. She's got a limousine. She's sitting in the back, just out for a drive in the country. And she says to her chauffeur, slow down. And there was a kid sitting there beside the road, and he had this beautiful dog. And there was a little sign beside him that said, dog for sale. And she rolled down her window and said, son, that's a beautiful dog. I'd be very interested in buying him. And the kid looks her over and says, okay, he'll cost you $5,000. And she said, you gotta be kidding. You know, I'm not gonna pay you $5,000 for that dog. And he said, well, that's the price. And she said, okay, son, nice to meet you. Rolls up her window and leaves. A couple days later, they're driving along the same stretch of road, and the kid's sitting there, and he doesn't have the dog anymore. He's got a little, like a pet carrier beside him, but no dog. And she says to her chauffeur, pull over. And she rolls down the window and says to the boy, you don't have your dog anymore. Did you sell him? He says, no, I don't have the dog anymore. Did you get your $5,000? And the kid says, well, no. And he points to the kennel carriers and he says, but I traded him on two $2,500 cats. So think about that. When you swap horses with somebody, just be careful that you're not trading your horse for a couple of $2,500 cats that might really be $250 cats or $2.50 cats, as the case may be. So always keep in mind that these things that don't have a hard value are in the eye of the beholder. So I'm gonna look over here a sec. When I got a little older, I had a nice gelding. I needed to sell him. He was a good horse, but he wasn't, well, he was a Palomino, but he looked white. He was sort of a washed out color, and he's a big rangy horse. And he could do some stuff, and he was a nice horse. But people would say, I just can't abide by his color, which I never understood. But the fact was he was hard to sell. So I put him in a consignment sale, and I figured his show record would sell him and the way he would demonstrate would sell him. But I got to the sale and it was a bloodbath. Just the horse prices were down. I was middle of the sale and horses were bringing a fraction of what I would have thought they'd bring. And Bill was at the sale. He wasn't selling any horses. He was selling fake Rolex watches because Bill was into a variety of different enterprises. And on this occasion, he bought a bunch of fake Rolex watches. And he'd take them down to the sales and take them over to the New Holland sale and sell them to people. And he had an interesting way of telling people the truth and appealing to their own larceny. He'd say, now, this isn't a real Rolex, it's a fake. That's why I can sell it to you for $35, but you and I will be the only ones who know that. Well, it looked like a $3,500 watch. It was a $35 watch. People would say, yeah, that's a good deal, and it does have the look, and people won't know the difference, and they'd pay him $35, and I know Bill was paying $5 a piece for them. So he always had that angle, but he wouldn't lie to you. He'd just say, you want to buy a fake Rolex? People were all about buying a fake Rolex and trying to pawn it off as being real. So I thought, anybody who has that kind of business sense, I better go consult. And I went over and said, Bill, I got a problem. I got this gelding, and I know I'm going to take a bath on him. I got to sell him. I never pull a horse out of a sale. He's here to sell, but I can't take the licking. What do I do? And Bill said, oh, it's real simple. Sell one, buy two. I said, what? He said, prices are down, you can afford to buy two. When prices go back up, you sell them, you're in good shape. Your horse is going to bring a fraction of what he's worth, but if you buy two of them at a discount, it more than evens out. And the fact is, those two horses together cost about what I had in the other gelding, and they brought about twice what I would have expected to get for him, and it all worked out. So you sell one, you buy two. Sometimes what seems backwards works. The other thing Bill said to me was, I said, Bill, you know, I've tried this deal of buying a horse and selling him and making money, and I'm not making any money selling horses. And he looks at me and says, oh, I'm not making any money selling horses either. I'm making money buying horses. I'm not going to explain that. Think about it. I'm not making money selling horses. I make my money buying horses. Sometimes you're looking at the wrong end of the transaction. Sometimes it's about what you pay for them, not what you get. Think about that a little. Final thing I learned from Bill, and this was more of a moral lesson, actually. Bill had a really nice little mare who could just do so much. I mean, she'd just stop. She'd get no bigger than a collie dog. She'd just crouch down. She could turn around like a border collie. Her name was, they called her Cat. And at that point, you know, selling a horse for $1,000 was a lot, and Bill wanted $1,000 for her, and he met a buyer in the form of a fellow around town that all of the kids called Uncle Allen, because he was one of the kids' uncles, and you know, if he was their uncle, he was everybody's uncle. And Uncle Allen came to look at the mare, fell in love with her, and said, I'll pay you $1,000. Now, Uncle Allen was kind of a dude. He had real nice hairdo, you know, he always wore a good hat. He wore the kind of shirts and had a different colored collar and a different colored cuff. And I mean, he was sort of a dandy guy, you know. And he thought he was pretty clever. So he gets over to pick the mare up. He hands Bill an envelope with the money in it. I load the horse. And Bill, who never counted money with all the sleazy horse traders he dealt with, he never counted money. Uncle Allen didn't sit quite right with him. He counts the money. He says, Allen, there's only $900 here. There's 9 $100 bills. And Allen says, well, you know, if you sell her for $1,000, you'll sell her for $900. And Bill didn't get angry off it, but he turned red. He says to me, get that bitch off the trailer. And I unloaded her, and Uncle Allen said, wait a minute. Bill says, nope, we've had a deal, and I don't back out of deals, and I don't let people back out of deals. And so net result was Uncle Allen paid $1,200 for the mare because Bill would not let me load her again for $1,000. I learned from that. You make a deal, you live by it. And I think people, even if they don't live by that themselves, they respect it. So that was a good life lesson for a kid. So thank you for the opportunity to sort of tell a few tales. Think about those things, because there are ways that you can get around in the horse world, learn a lot of stuff, and also gain some skills that will keep you from getting burned too much if you're trading one horse for another, or if you're buying a new horse, which we all do at some point in our lifetime with horses. Good luck with yours. Thank you.